Today, we are going to be walking through 7 specific steps. There's 7 steps to better living. That's how I've coined them. And this is a tried and true formula. The funny thing about transformation is that very often the more that you want it, the less you're able to achieve. The more that you try, the less that you're able to do, right? The greater the to-do list is, the less you're able to be your new self, the less you're able to overcome your old self and become somebody different. So I want to open up the hood a little bit on this formula, these steps that have worked for me consistently throughout the years, and I've seen them transform many of my clients' lives. I have had clients go from not leaving their bedroom for 6 months at a time to killing it, to being in school, being in clubs, to getting new relationships, to losing weight, to overcoming social anxiety, to learning how to communicate with their family, to setting boundaries, to going on risks, traveling, backpacking, really stretching themselves past what they previously thought was possible of themselves. And there is a formula, there is a method, there is a secret sauce, and it's not something that you're going to find in a lot of self-help books. It's not something that you are going to find um, at that next retreat. There's transformation is a very fickle process. What what we are seeking to do here is to attain psychological death and rebirth. You need to die before you die so that you never die. You need to touch something so pure, so transcendent, so divine that that new self can't help but that you, so that you can't be helped but pulled into that new self. I find that very often when people begin their inner work, their emotional, their spiritual, their psychological, their therapeutic work, they're being pushed. They're being pushed by their pain. They're being pushed by their baggage. They're being pushed by the person that they're trying to leave behind. And that's okay. That's good fuel. It's totally okay if that's the case. But eventually, in my experience, the tides turn and something shifts, and you go from being pushed by your pain to being pulled by a vision of something greater. And so that is what these steps are designed to do. They are designed to put you in a position where you can receive the benefits of uncertainty. You can receive the benefits of something beyond the limitations of your own thinking. Because you cannot solve a problem with the same level of mind that created a problem. We need something beyond the limitations of our own thinking to hit that next step and that next level of our own human development. So let's go ahead and dive on into it, shall we? Okay, so step number 1, the most important step here is that you have to reclaim your mind. Okay. I'm sorry to say it. I might be the first one to inform this of you, but you have been programmed. You have been brainwashed. 95% of our mind is subconscious. I know, like, that's like a buzzword or a buzz statistic. You hear that around and people just skip over it. Oh, 95% of who I am is all subconscious. Great. No, let's really understand the implications of what that means. That means you are not who you think you are. Bottom line, you are not who you think you are. Who you think you are, that analytical prefrontal cortex default mode network, is only 5% of who you are. It is really astonishing when you sit and you drink in that reality. Okay, so the first step is to reclaim your mind. Understand that culture, that your family, your experiences, you have been brainwashed, for lack of a better term, right? People use this word, the matrix. People talk about NPCs as folks who are programmed or brainwashed. I really don't like that term, NPCs, non-player characters. I think I think it's, it's obviously not inclusive of any systematic issues that really keep people, binded in this level of consciousness. So I'm not going to ever use it again, but I just want to give you that framework, that understanding of what it is that I'm talking about here, right? So we need to go from living and walking aimlessly through life to living a self-directed life. We're talking about agency here, right? Agency maxing is one of the most important things that you can do as a human being on this planet, man, woman, old, young, white, black, green, yellow, whatever it may be. Maxing your agency is the most important thing that you can do. So you need to reclaim your mind. And one of the first places to do this is to just begin to develop original thought. Original thinking is very, very rare these days. And especially when you may be a bit of a book nerd like me, when you really dive into literature and you can understand that almost every single piece of Western literature can be traced back to either Plato or the Bible, right? You have to really go deep and go far into more of a primordial ooze in order to find the flavor of your own original thought. So there is nothing that is more beneficial for you to deprogram your sense of self and who you are and really begin to uncover the flavor of that 95% that lives in the unconscious than deep meditation. I just finished a massive 7-day meditation. I was going to say sprint, but marathon. I just meditated for over 30 hours over the course of 7 days. And let me tell you, when you go through a rite of passage such as that, when you willingly put yourself into the inferno and really put some shackles on the animal body and create greater space between some of your autonomic reflexes, autonomic sense of self, belief system, right? Core beliefs, thoughts, etc. You create massive distance in that container. You begin to really understand this fact, this great reality that 95% of who you are is built and ingrained on a deep subconscious level. So one of my favorite pieces of advice that a mentor gave me back in my early 20s was around this understanding of curating original thought, curating self-directed thought. A self-directed life requires self-directed thought. So, in my early 20s, one of the things that I used to do was I would specifically carve out time in the morning to just explore my own thinking, right? Not what I've, read on a recent book. I got this puppy right here. Not what I've heard on a recent podcast, something like that. I landed at this point in my life where I realized that whether I was at a dinner party and I was chatting or, this is before I got online, before I started making content, but things that would come out of my mouth, and I had to be completely honest with myself that I was like, oh wow, I actually heard that on this podcast. Oh wow, that fun fact like came from this book, right? And so how much of my own thought life was original and originally curated by myself. So I've been able to identify a couple questions here. I've got four of them that I think are just incredibly useful in developing original thought. Now, these questions are hard. Okay, these questions are really tough. They are going to require some flexibility and some open-mindedness. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through these first two questions, which are super connected. Okay, and I want to share that I gained a lot of clarity on these questions just within the last couple years. And what I really did, and when I planted my flag within the roots of my own answers, and really understood, I anchored my identity in the roots of these answers. Right, that things shifted big time. This was right before I got online. This is when I left a previous business, and this is when my life really began to blossom and unfold in this beautiful way because I finally felt like I stood for something that really truly was mine. So these questions. The first one is who and what, two-parter, who and what are you willing to die for? Okay, it's going to be people, ideas, your country, right? Virtues. I don't want to give you guys too much, but who and what are you willing to die for? And I want you to just sink into the severity of this question, right? Memento mori, like just embrace this symbol of death, this reality of death, and who and what are you willing to die for? Okay. The next piece is who and what are you willing to kill for? Now, again, this one is gnarly, right? These are gnarly questions. Man, woman, it does not matter. I don't use these words lightly, but these are very important things to consider and very important questions to answer. So those are the first two, okay? Who and what are you willing to die for? Who and what are you willing to kill for? Okay, so these next two questions that are going to be really useful in reclaiming your mind and in walking down this path of reclamation of your original thinking. Okay. So question number 3. What have I always known to be false that other people think is true? I'm gonna not I almost wanted to give you guys my answers right there, but I don't want to do that because I do not want to give you guys any shortcuts or any ideas. This is about you, okay? And question number 4. What have I always known to be true that other people think is false? Again, these questions, treat them as a meditative experiment. I don't mean meditation, but I mean drink it in, marinate in it, see what emotions come up, spend some time with it, spend a week, spend a couple days, right? Like revisit these questions. These are really important questions that should cut to the root of who you are. Okay, so step number 2 on our ladder here within the 7 steps to better living. Step number 2 is to rewind your mind. So we had reclaim your mind as number 1. This is rewind your mind. You are burnt out from digital overload. Do not confuse stimulation with transformation. It has been my experience when a couple different times in my life when I've taken big digital detoxes, I did not realize how much my attention, my focus, my mind, my stress levels, my vitality, my energy was impacted by the constant stimulus of technology until I got some distance from it. On this recent study that I saw on X, on the timeline on X recently, they did this study where they gave people a 2-week digital detox. And within those 2 weeks, by the end of those 2 weeks, they found that it decreased these folks' cognitive decline by up to 2 years. So that is just remarkable. I mean, think about how much vitality and energy is being put into this tech, right? Our attention, and where we place our attention is where we place our energy. And now this doesn't even go this number 2 is also deeply connected to number 1, right? Because our brains can become completely hijacked by the algorithms, by the bubbles, by the echo chambers, by what we see on the internet. So you're going to have to create intentional distance from your mind, right? In order to rewind your mind, you got to have distance from your thinking. And so what that means is that you're going to want to snuggle up and get nice and close to your nervous system, and specifically your parasympathetic nervous system, right? Your rest and digest nervous system. So there's a handful of ways to do this, to give your mind a break. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, right? But walking is a big one. I would encourage you when you're walking, be really mindful of your gait and specifically your feet. So when you're walking, your big toe should actually be the last part of your body leaving the ground. If you can put your focus on your big toe while you're walking, it's really, really going to heighten your ability to be present. It's going to increase the potency of your presence. Okay. So outside of walking, I already mentioned meditation. It's going to be incredibly important as well. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You don't have to do 30 hours in 7 days. Lots of great resources out there. Personally, I'm a huge fan of transcendental meditation. I'm a huge fan of Joe Dispenza's work. I have some experience with some Vipassana and some traditional, Vedic type meditations as well. But really, whatever it is that works for you. Breath work can be, foundational as well. It doesn't have to be holotropic Wim Hof type breathing. You could do bilateral nose breathing. I've got actually a couple different instructions on some specific types of breathing patterns, not necessarily breath work, but those are going to be down below in a link that I have in the bio. I've got a body mind accelerator. It's going to be a quick and free, 5-day free email course to walk you through some of these tools, which are going to be incredibly useful. Obviously, journaling is going to be foundational as well too. There's something about putting a pen to the paper that really just slows down your thinking and slows down your thought life in a really beautiful and gorgeous way. So when you're thinking about these habits, when you're thinking about these habits, I want you to think of them in terms of weekly quotas instead of daily. So what happens is that a lot of folks they want to pick up a new habit and they put all of this pressure on myself, right? Freudian slip, on themselves, and they create this perfect schedule, these perfect strategies. They're gonna knock all these things out on a daily basis, but the whole goal of this is to create a little bit of space and distance so that we can receive really the secret sauce of transformation, some of those codes, um, not have to work so hard at it. So I want you to think of these things in terms of weeks instead of days, right? So maybe it's 5 meditations a week, it's 5 journaling sessions a week, whatever it may be. But make sure you hit the mark. Make sure you prioritize these. These are things that really they stack up over time, right? We're creating 1% of a difference in our trajectory. And so on day 2, day 3, that 1% is not that much, but by day 20, right, there's a big chunk there in that graph of how we've been able to really experience the fruits of these wonderful practices. Step number 3. Now this might be my favorite, one of my favorites. I'm such a huge fan of this step. So, step number 3 involves mastering the 24-hour habit. So, your life is nothing but a repeating 24-hour habit. And there's good news, okay, is that nature has provided you rhythms in which to attune to master this 24-hour habit. And the bottom line is that if you master this 24-hour habit, you end up mastering your life. So, 3 aspects to this 24-hour habit, which are going to be super crucial, which we're going to let the body really lead during this practice of mastering our 24-hour habit. So we have our circadian rhythm, which dictates our sleep cycle in relationship to the rising and setting of the sun. So if you can master your circadian rhythm, you're going to end up mastering your energy, right? You're going to master that sleep schedule. There's a lot of different things that fall under the umbrella of your circadian rhythm. So, I think a lot of us know, but I'll repeat it for those who don't. One of the most important things to really max this circadian rhythm is to make sure you're getting sunlight right in the morning. First thing in the morning when you wake up, you want to get sunlight in your eyeballs. It's important early because apparently, I'm not a scientist, but it's about the angle of the rays when it hits your retina, something that triggers the melatonin in your body for 8-10 hours later, whenever that may be. So um, circadian rhythm is going to be incredibly important. Try and go to sleep and wake up at the same time, right? I mean, simply put, like a lot of this stuff, you kind of have to like live like a dog, eat at the same time, eat the same stuff, fall asleep at the same time. This sort of routine is really good for us within our 24-hour habit. Our body really craves these natural rhythms. So from the circadian rhythm, I just mentioned it, but also like our digestion. It's really important to understand the rhythms of our body, and if you're waking up in the morning and you don't have an appetite, you're not hungry until noon. You're crushing zins and coffees until 1 p.m. and then you eat a lunch. There may be something under the hood. You may want to take a look at that, because you should be waking up with an appetite. You should be, finishing your last meal a couple hours before bed. If you can really master your own digestive system, master your relationship to food and when you eat, again, a lot of stuff falls under this umbrella. So the third piece that's crucial within this 24-hour habit is our nervous system regulation. And a lot of this can be connected to, specific hormones like the stress hormone cortisol, which is specifically supposed to spike in the morning to give you a little bit of healthy fuel and energy as you go on through about your day. So um, yeah, there is a natural rhythm of which nature has provided us in our bodies in relationship to each 24 hours, right? The rising and setting of the sun. If you can really key in and lock in your body to that natural rhythm of which God has provided for us, everything else is going to be so much easier. All of the emotional work, the mental work, the relational work, of which we'll continue to talk about, is just going to be so much easier. So if you want more, again, I know I already mentioned it, I specifically have a course on nervous system regulation. It's down below, that Body Mind Accelerator. It is completely free. Go ahead and check that out. So the last thing that I'll say about this 24-hour habit is that, when people get inspired to walk down a path of transformation, they start thinking about the macro. They start thinking about these big ideals, their grand vision, their 90-day plans, their 5-year plans. But like, great, great. I'm here for it. I love it if it works for you. But like I said, if you can really master the micro, if you can master your morning, afternoon, and night, you master your sleep, you master your digestion, you master, the flexibility of your nervous system, right? When you need sympathetic, when you need a little more juice to go, and when you know that you really need to find deep rest and relaxation, which is often so challenging for folks, a lot of stuff is going to fall under this umbrella. So instead of focusing on the big macro, I would really, really encourage you to focus on the micro of your 24-hour habit. Step number 4 is to be a bouncer. Entry to your life should be exclusive, and you need to curate your VIP list. You need to be a bouncer. The bottom line is that most people lack boundaries. We have been conditioned into niceness in this world, especially if you're a man. A man. That was weird. There's a big difference between being nice and being kind. Sometimes the kind thing in the immediate feels or looks hurtful. Okay. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Now, being nice often looks like people pleasing, often looks like lack of lack of assertiveness. It looks like conflict avoidance. It looks like putting other people's needs before your own. You have to be a bouncer, okay? So I'm going to use a fancy word right here. It is called neuroception, which is basically this reality that people's nervous systems, they exchange information with each other. We have a biofield of electromagnetic energy that exists outside our physical body, and when we're sharing space with other people, the information within the frequency of that electromagnetism is shared. We share information. We are osmotic. We have osmosis is happening all the time with the people that are around us, right? There's that classic saying, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So I want to talk a little bit about friends, right? And here's the thing is that friends, they should support you. They also should challenge you, right? Your friends should inspire you. They also should confront you. Now, when you're looking for friends, when you're looking for people in which you want to move forward into your next stage of human development with, I want you to find and think about the folks and really pursue friendship with folks that have things that you want. Okay. And now I don't necessarily mean, a car or a boat or a house or, I mean, that too, right? 100% if that's the case. But think about characteristics, right? If somebody is integrous, if they're hardworking, they have discipline, they're ethical, they're honest, whatever it may be. Think about people who have things that you want and spend time with those folks, right? As I just said, our nervous systems are constantly sharing information with each other. So, things to be considered for sure. Make sure that you are spending time curating your VIP list. The bottom line is that we also form extremely unhealthy attachments to each other. We find people who validate maladaptive familial roles, right? Roles that we used to play when we were kids, when we were younger. We find people who serve as mirrors, who continue to reflect that same stuff back to us, and validate those deep emotional complexes, subconscious woundings, programs, beliefs, whatever it may be, so that we can continue to live in this place of familiarity. The bottom line is that you should be ruthless with your time and energy. I have a little phrase that I like to throw around where I talk about ruthless love. What does that mean, like to be ruthlessly loving? And that can look like many different things. Many different things fall under that umbrella, right? Perhaps an act of ruthless love is ending a friendship. Perhaps that is the most loving thing for yourself. But what I mean by ruthless is that having the discernment to just say no. And the bottom line is that you're going to feel guilty when you start setting boundaries, especially if this is your first time. You're going to feel that familiar tug and pull of familiarity. So you need to account for that. And that is when it's doubly important to really lean on some of these practices of which we've already talked about: the journaling, the meditation, the breath work, that type of stuff. Is the nervous system regulation. That's going to be extremely important for when the old familiar pull of codependency or people pleasing begins to creep back up again. Okay, step number 5 on the 7 steps to better living is to cultivate universal gifts. So, a lot of folks spend a lot of time thinking about their purpose, trying to find their purpose, wondering if they have it. How could I find my purpose? They get something that they want, and then it's, oh, this actually isn't in alignment with my purpose. There's a lot of conversation around this idea of purpose. I understand it. I think that there is value in it in a lot of ways. I personally don't love the word purpose. I kind of maybe prefer some different, I think language is really important. Maybe I prefer the word mission in some ways, especially for me as a dude. That kind of gives me a little bit more of a little call to action there. Um, so stop trying to find your purpose. Okay. You don't need to find anything. Inherent in the idea of finding lives the reality that you currently lack it. So we're just going to remove this neurological network out of our awareness. We're not going to be looking for our purpose anymore, but instead we're going to be cultivating universal gifts. And so I've got a list right here. I've got a list of universal gifts. If you head in the direction of trying to embody and cultivate and live in these qualities of which I'm about to share with you, the ironic thing is that purpose, what people think is purpose, ends up finding them in some ways, right? And so here is the list of universal gifts. Okay. So the best way to create more purpose is to share universal gifts. Now, there's one more thing I want to say here before I go into this list. What another reason of why we leave the idea of trying to find your purpose behind is because it facilitates victim consciousness. So when folks are stressing out about finding their purpose or not having it, they want it, they're looking for it, they're operating from a place of victimhood. And if you remember, the very first step is about agency and agency maxing. And a person who has high agency, they don't feel like a victim. Okay. So we're leaving that behind. So here's the list. Okay. This is the best way to create more purpose in your life: joy, embody joy, do things that bring you joy, energy. Think about your behaviors through the lens of, does this behavior increase or decrease my energy? What type of energy is going to my brain? Curiosity, right? If you can be, and a super important aspect of curiosity is understanding the limitations of your own thinking, right? Is there something more here than I'm not seeing or present or privy to? Let me be curious about that, but not from this stern place, from this kind of joyful, energetic, wondrous place, right? So curiosity. Then we have creativity, right? I have found that a lot of folks that I know and that I've worked with that struggled with anxiety, with depression, once they, underneath all of that was this deep desire to give their energy and their life force through the form of output, through the form of creativity. So just create. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, you could be, the homie, making sandwiches at Subway and be artistic and creative with your act, with your creation, right? Creativity is a state of mind. It's a poetic state. So on top of that, we have a desire to serve and a desire to connect. Okay. The solution to a lot of pain and suffering is to get out of self, right? We think about selfishness, self pity, self-centeredness, right? What do all these things have in common? The word self. Spending time thinking about yourself is a recipe for dissatisfaction and a desire to connect. Okay. So like leaning into people, right? Whether you're on the bus, you're on the train and somebody's reading a book that looks interesting to you, and can you lean in with curiosity, with wonder, with joy, with energy, right? Ask them about the book. Like we humans are designed to be interdependent. So serving others, connecting with others is going to be extremely important. So I've had so many people, tell me that they felt like they were lost in life. They didn't know what they were doing. And so instead of thinking about that, we're leaving that neurological network behind. Instead of that, and moving towards these qualities: joy, energy, curiosity, creativity, desire to serve, desire to connect. It's like clockwork. Okay, like their gifts, they begin to resurface because we've created space for them to emerge. Alrighty, so that number 5, it was universal gifts. If you embody universal gifts, you're going to have a better time. I guarantee it. Now, the last thing that I'll say about this is that your purpose is not a profession, but it's more of an embodied feeling. And that feeling of which everyone seems to be looking for are these things in this list: joy, energy, curiosity, creativity, desire to serve, desire to connect, desire to engage in life. That is what people are looking for. That is what you are looking for. That is what purpose is. Purpose is not a profession, it is a sustained feeling. Okay, step number 6 is to lay bricks. Now, a lot of people talk about the importance of building your mind, like like I did within these first couple steps. But what I think is equal, not even equally, what I think is more important, to be completely honest, and what I think should maybe even come first, maybe I should have flipped these around a little bit, but we roll, we ride. Lay bricks, okay? So what that means is to build heart. And we do that through the pursuit of virtues. But now let me just pause here for a second, okay? So we want to lay bricks within our identity. And what that means is that we want to build evidence in our identity that we are who we think we are. Okay. So, an identity based off of your job, your, how much money you make, your work status, as father, as brother, whatever it may be, these identities are incredibly dynamic, meaning that they fluctuate and they change, right? For example, when I was 16, I was a fairly accomplished athlete. When I was, in my younger teens, I was a nationally ranked tennis player. I traveled all over the country, and I was really, really anchored in my identity as an athlete. Now, what happened was that I blew out my knee twice within 10 months, and I was 16 years old, right? And so that sense of identity was smashed. Couldn't move like I used to. I couldn't run. I used to be extremely fast. I no longer could get up and down the field. I also played lacrosse, like I used to be able to. And that crushed my identity in a lot of ways because it was attached to this static nature. And we also live in this, achievement obsessed culture. We prioritize skill development and status over compassion and our character formation. We track followers and likes and income and all of this stuff, but we rarely measure our growth and patience, right? In integrity and love. So instead of focusing our identity on these dynamic qualities, I encourage you to anchor your identity in things that are way more static, such as virtues. And so I've got 4 foundational virtues right here. Now, if you pursue these virtues over everything else, you're going to have a good time. Okay. So let's take a look at the 4 foundational virtues. Number 1 is prudence, which simply means common sense. Cultivate your common sense. Number 2, temperance. Temperance means moderation in all things, okay? I don't think I need to go any deeper into that. Number 3, justice, right? Which is a fairness, an honesty, a respect. If you try to embody a sense of fairness and respect and honesty in this world, you're going to get greater opportunities. People want to work with good people. Good things happen to good people. And then we have fortitude, which is fighting for what is morally right, right? Highly connected to courage. So, to begin focusing on these virtues, I suggest, kind of like you could do a fit. No, because there's only 4 of them. Just focus on like one a week, right? Or one a month, during temperance week. Notice, how you can cultivate more moderation in your eating and your speaking and your spending and whatever it may be in your digital consumption. These simple practices of embodying these virtues, they build your heart. And when you build heart, everything else in life seems to come and follow from that anchor point. Okay, step number 7 is called down the ladder. The teacher appears when the student is ready. And now this ancient wisdom, it only tells half of the story, because seeking mentors is extremely valuable, but what you should be seeking instead is mentees, right? And now don't be weird about it. Don't go be, out there in the world looking for people that you can father, right? I'm not talking about codependency here, but what I'm actually talking about is integration. And so when you can teach something, you have fully learned and embodied those teachings, right? I had a wonderful example of this with one of my clients who was really struggling with anxiety. And one of the things that I encouraged him to do after we've been working together for maybe 8 months, 7 months, maybe, um, was to he started an anxiety support group at his church that he led. He was 20 years old, 21 years old. So it was a bunch of young folks that he got together to come around and talk about anxiety and the challenges, that the very real challenges that come with being anxious and living with anxiety. And so he did that for a couple months. And then I remember in one of our sessions, he told me that he it was so beneficial for him because he could really see where it was in his understanding that he lacked, right? As he was communicating what had worked for him in our work together, what was beneficial, he started to identify where there were some blank spots in his understanding, right? He became face to face. He had to face his own limitations in his ability to communicate the truth in his experience in his relationship with anxiety. And now this isn't about seeking any disciples or anything like that. It's about just in investing in other people, investing in the interconnected nature of communities, of families, of relationships, really, this collaborative nature of life. So for me, I have a couple men in my life that I really look to, who are older, who are a little bit further down the ladder than I may be, right? Some mentors that I turn to for some specific things. I have some specific men in some different sort of areas that I can go to for specific things. I also, I mean, I obviously I work with a lot of people, but beyond that, whether it's friends or here in my community or where I play tennis, I have people that come to me as well that need some support, that need some uplifting, that need a little bit of guidance, and I make myself available, right? I like to be in the chain link of brotherhood. I like to simultaneously be a father and a son. It is the only way that I get to experience like true vulnerability and the fruits of my own relational capacity as a man. The moment that you can really teach is the moment that you integrate, right? The moment that you can be of service is the moment that you get out of self. Just consider how your own knowledge and your own experiences may help another, and find opportunities to give back. You could give back to yourself, give back to your family, give back to your community, right? Get online, share your story, make content. There is something that happens, something magical that happens when you start focusing down the ladder. Folks that are a little bit further down the ladder than you are. We as humans, we evolved to be reciprocal in nature. We evolved to be interdependent. And our success, it doesn't come from just the individual, it comes from the collective and our ability to learn, grow, adapt, and connect collectively. Okay, folks. So that's all I got for you today. To the untrained eye, these 7 steps, they may seem basic, they may seem like basic self-improvement advice, but I would encourage you to be open and be willing and to look at these things a little bit deeper. This probably isn't what you would expect. This isn't your traditional therapeutic advice, coming from myself, an associate marriage family therapist. But um, I have found that some of these, abstract or even more philosophical approaches can be equally, if not more, beneficial than like a top-down CBT, cognitive behavioral approach, or something like that. Everything has its value, everything, in its own time and place. But these 7 steps, treat them as an adventure, treat them as a bit of a game. You can gamify them if you want, but this process is about overcoming this old self, right? You have to die to your old self. You die before you die so that you never die, right? This life is about psychological death and rebirth. You look at the hero's journey, you look at the great mythology. We have to jump into the unknown. We have to overcome ourselves. We have to open ourselves up to the gifts of uncertainty and the blessings of things that exist beyond the limitations of our own thinking. So this is one of the one. These are 7 steps that are going to help you jump into new novel space so that you can receive greater understanding, greater gifts, greater blessings of things in which you were previously holding on so tight. You can let go, understand, plug into the natural flow rhythm of life, and really trust that taking this leap, choosing to do things differently, you're gonna get some different results. So some of these steps may come easy, some of them may challenge you deeply, right? Return to them as needed, and just please, please, please remember that growth, transformation, healing, it is not a linear process. It is cyclical in nature. And at times, a regression may, in fact, be a regression in service to something bigger and greater. Do not label and identify from this lens, this judgment of good and bad. Try and create a more of a macro bird's eye view beyond the dualistic framework of good and bad. Drink in the moisture of what is and align yourself with these timeless truths so that you can make transformation work for you instead of you working so hard for it. That's all I got. Brian Meyerhofer signing out. I appreciate y'all. Subscribe, like this video, send it to somebody who needs. Check out the free email course, sign up for my newsletter. I put out bangers every single week. I do deep dives in all things psychology, philosophy, relationships, mental health. Share some more of my personal story there. Really looking forward to continue cultivating this relationship with you guys. I'm here. I'm here for the long game, right? I've got so much to share. I'm really excited to be here. And that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Cheers.